The story of Native Americans is the story of North America itself, tens of thousands of years of civilization, innovation, collapse, survival, and renewal. Long before Europe emerged from the Middle Ages, hundreds of indigenous nations thrived across the continent, each with its own language, government, belief system, and economy. Human arrival in the Americas began at least 16,000 to 20,000 years ago, likely through coastal migrations along the Pacific Kelp Highway, not only through the Bering Land Bridge. These early explorers settled nearly every environment, from Arctic tundra to deserts and river valleys. They domesticated the dog and engineered maize from a wild grass called teosinte, creating one of the most transformative crops in world history. By 1000 AD, North America was home to complex cities and vast trade networks. In the Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans constructed multi-story great houses in Chaco Canyon, aligned with celestial cycles. In the Mississippi Valley, the Cahokia grew into a city of 20,000 to 30,000 people by 1150 AD, its Monk's Mound rivaling the footprint of Egyptian pyramids. In the Northeast, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy united 5 nations under the Great Law of Peace, a sophisticated democratic constitution that later influenced American political thinkers. This was not wilderness. It was a continent shaped by centuries of agriculture, engineering, diplomacy, and philosophy. European arrival in 1492 unleashed an unseen enemy, disease. Smallpox, measles, and influenza swept across a population with no immunity, killing an estimated 90% of indigenous people within a century. Entire societies collapsed before Europeans ever encountered them. Explorers like Hernando de Soto saw bustling towns in the 1540s, but when English settlers arrived a century later, they found abandoned fields and cleared forests. Mistaking catastrophe for emptiness, they imagined a virgin land prepared for them, unaware they walked through a landscape recently devastated by pandemics. Despite this collapse, Native nations remained powerful forces for centuries during the colonial era. The Spanish attempted to control and convert indigenous peoples, provoking revolts like the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, the most successful indigenous uprising in North American history. The French relied on alliance and trade, intermarrying with tribes and forming the Métis culture in the north. The English, however, wanted land. Tensions erupted into King Philip's War, 1675 to 1676, when the Wampanoag leader Metacomet attempted to expel English settlers. It remains the deadliest war in American history relative to population. The American Revolution only worsened indigenous prospects. Although many tribes fought or negotiated to protect their homelands, the 1783 peace treaty between Britain and the United States transferred native lands without native consent. In the early 1800s, the Shawnee leader, Tecumseh, sought to unite all tribes into a single confederacy, arguing that land belonged collectively to all native peoples. His movement collapsed after his death in 1813, clearing the way for U.S. expansion. In the Southwest, the Cherokee Nation chose diplomacy and adaptation, building schools, a capital, and a written language. They won a Supreme Court case, Worcester v. Georgia, 1832, affirming their sovereignty. President Andrew Jackson ignored it. Under the Indian Removal Act of 1830, the 5 civilized tribes were forced westward in winter. Thousands died on what became known as the Trail of Tears. Still, these nations rebuilt governments, courts, and schools in Oklahoma within a few years. As America expanded west, it encountered the horse nations of the Great Plains, Lakota, Cheyenne, Kiowa, and Comanche, whose mastery of horsemanship created powerful societies centered around the buffalo. The Comanche, in particular, halted European, Mexican, and American expansion for over a century, forming a dominant regional empire. After the Civil War, the United States used total war to conquer the plains. At Sand Creek, Colorado militia slaughtered peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho families. Red Cloud's War forced the U.S. to abandon forts in 1868, but gold in the Black Hills shattered the peace. In 1876, Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse defeated Custer at Little Bighorn, but the U.S. responded with overwhelming force. The military then encouraged mass buffalo slaughter, reducing herds from over 30 million to less than 1,000, starving native nations and forcing surrender. The violent conquest ended in 1890 at Wounded Knee, where the U.S. Army massacred around 300 Lakota participating in the Ghost Dance movement. With military resistance crushed, the U.S. government began a campaign to erase Indigenous identity. Boarding schools removed children from families, cut their hair, forbade their languages, and punished cultural expression under the motto, "Kill the Indian, save the man." The Dawes Act, 1887, broke up communal lands and sold surplus to settlers, stripping tribes of about 90 million acres. Yet even during this era of oppression, Native people served in the U.S. military. The Navajo code talkers used their language to create an unbreakable code during World War II, directly contributing to Allied victory. In the 1950s, U.S. policy turned to termination, dissolving tribal governments and ending federal recognition for over 100 tribes. The relocation program moved thousands into cities with promises that often led to poverty and isolation. This urban migration unintentionally united tribes, fueling a new era of activism. The Red Power movement began with the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969, a 19-month protest that transformed public perception. The American Indian Movement, AIM, confronted police brutality and fought for treaty rights, culminating in the 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee. Their efforts led to major reforms, including the 1977 Indian Self-Determination Act, which restored tribal authority over schools, law enforcement, and programs. The modern era has seen legal victories, cultural revival, and economic rebuilding. Casinos under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988 allowed many tribes to fund healthcare, education, and cultural programs, though economic inequality persists between tribes. In 2020, the Supreme Court ruled in McGurk v. Oklahoma that much of eastern Oklahoma remains legally recognized reservation land. Indigenous peoples have also become global leaders in environmental protection, exemplified by the 2016 Standing Rock protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline. Today, 574 federally recognized tribes continue to rebuild languages, governments, and traditions once targeted for destruction. The story of Native Americans is not one of disappearance, but of endurance, a testament to the strength of peoples whose bond with the land has withstood centuries of upheaval.